And now to the conflict in Syria. NATO said today that it would consider a Turkish request to deploy Patriot missiles to protect itself from Syrian attacks. Turkey and Syria share a 560-mile-long border, and after Syrian mortar rounds landed in Turkish territory, concerns have risen that the civil war fighting could spread further. In Margaret Warner's latest report, she examines the spillover that's already happening.
Nestled up against the border with Syria, Ceylanpınar, Turkey has an all-too-up-close view of the civil war next door, as fighting rages in its Syrian twin city of Ras Al Ain. For days last week on the Syrian side, President Bashar al-Assad's forces fought rebels of the Free Syrian Army, or FSA, to control Ras Al Ain. Terrified Syrian civilians scrambled, some over razor wire, into Ceylanpınar. The FSA finally took over the Syrian town, but not before badly fraying nerves in its Turkish neighbor. Turk Abdulaziz Guven said he'd had to rescue his cousins from the Syrian side.
The fight started at 3 o'clock. At 7 a.m. we went to the border, called our cousins there, and told them to come to the border. They are staying at my house now as my guests.
With the fighting in Syrian areas like Ras Al Ain, just 100 yards behind me, spilling over into Turkish towns like here in Ceylanpınar, Turkey finds itself walking a fine line between defending its interests and being drawn into a regional war. Yesterday, Turkish soldiers were patrolling their side of the border, while FSA rebels drove along their side, flag flying. Now there's new factional fighting in Ras Al Ain between the FSA and Syrian Kurds, and locals in the Turkish town are nervous about what's to come.
Bullets are coming from the other side to here. Our children are scared. Many families moved away because they are scared.
When she hears the planes, my daughter says, "Father, are the planes of Bashar coming here?" We're very much concerned that the war will get much wider throughout the Middle East.
It wasn't always this way. Turkey and Syria were once allies. But Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan broke with Damascus in August 2011, after his appeals to Assad to negotiate with democracy protesters were answered with deadly bombings against them during Ramadan. Since then, Turkey has provided safe haven to Syrian refugees and fighters. Stray fire from the Syrian side has killed Turkish civilians, prompting Turkey to fire back. Now Turkey, a NATO member, is poised to receive Patriot missiles from the alliance to fortify this 500-mile border. Turks throughout the country are fretting about the prospect of wider war. Even people like Inci Altunuk, out for a Sunday stroll in Istanbul, hundreds of miles from the conflict.
I would not support a war, but if it comes, Turkey would finish Syria in minutes. Turkey is a very strong country. We would all come together and strangle Syria.
But polls show there's little appetite for war. Cetin Ingiz said he had to leave his border province of Hatay for Istanbul because tensions from the war had dried up local jobs.
Mr. Erdogan is provoking Syria at the moment, and he's screaming about war. People in Hatay used to live on money from the outside. Before, there would be 10, 15, even 50 buses coming every day from Syria. Now, there are no buses.
The most visible consequence of the crisis and the violence in Syria on Turkey is an economic one.
Political scientist Kamal Kirishi of Istanbul's Bogazici University says border provinces like Hatay have been hardest hit.
So there was a very heavy truck transit traffic going through Syria. A lot of Turkish companies were doing business with the Arab world beyond Syria. Jordan, Egypt, the Gulf states. And by this summer, trade and business has grinded to a halt.
Part of that lost trade, shopping in places like Hatay's capital, Antakya. Syrians used to flock by the busload to this souk in Antakya to buy everything from clothing to household wares of the variety and quality they couldn't get at home. But since the civil war erupted in Syria, that boon to business here has all but evaporated. Jewelry store owner Zeyna Buyukleya says her sales are down 50%.
When they came, they would buy everything, gold and jewelry. And it's not only our business, everybody else's is going down here.
The break with Syria has also been felt in the sprawling city of Gaziantep, a manufacturing powerhouse just 30 miles north of Syria. Exports have fueled businesses like Naksan, now one of the top 5 plastic bag and packing makers in the world. But most of its exports to the Middle East and North Africa went through Syria. We caught up with Gaziantep Mayor Asim Guzelbey at his city's newly opened museum for ancient mosaics. He sought to downplay the impact, but conceded the loss of trade between Gaziantep and its sister city Aleppo, 2 hours south.
We had very good relations. The trade between Turkey and Syria was large, and Syria was important to Turkey for exports. But those things are left in the past now.
A medical doctor by training, he says Syrians now come here for different reasons. So do you have injured people coming here to Gaziantep?
Yes, of course. A lot of injured people came to Gaziantep.
Where are they treated?
We treat them in our hospitals in Gaziantep and throughout Turkey, and the expenses are paid by the Turkish government.
Turks are also footing the bill for an ever-growing number of camps in its borderlands, which now shelter more than 100,000 Syrian refugees. This former tobacco factory in Yaylada was the first. Most of its 2,400 residents are settling in for their second winter in tents equipped with electricity and satellite TV. For some, brick and mortar are replacing canvas and tarps. When will they be able to leave? Cemal Argul is a Turkish-Arabic translator at the camp.
Neither we nor they know when they will go back, and even if they go back, most of them have nothing.
But 18-month camp resident Armani Carnibo made it clear she and her family yearn to go home. What are these symbols of?
These are symbols of victory.
She has fashioned artwork out of seeds, grains, rice, and paint.
We want to show we refugees are here not only eating and sleeping. We have a goal to achieve. We want to go back to our homes.
Mariam Hajusef and her husband Ahmed had one son killed by Assad's security forces, and now their second son is fighting with the resistance.
They took everything. They stole our homes and burned them.
Her anger ebbed when she spoke of what Turkey has done.
Thanks to God we are here. Thanks to them for their hospitality.
What would you do if Turkey weren't providing this place to be?
They would have killed us all.
I think the Turkish public, by and large, feels a lot of empathy with these refugees.
But now, says Kamal Karishi, there's a growing backlash against them, particularly among members of Turkey's minority Alawi sect, who share bonds with Assad's ruling Alawites in Syria.
The conflict in Syria that sometimes has been defined in Turkey as a conflict between a regime that is minority-based or /Alawite-based versus a Sunni majority has had a spillover effect in Turkey.
Indeed, we heard scorn for the mostly Sunni refugees, and it was loudly expressed in the central square of the mostly Alawi seaside town of Samanda.
They are all al-Qaeda. They are terrorists and criminals brought here from Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq. The CIA paid them each $50,000 to come here.
We are Alawites here too. If they have sectarian problems over there, we feel pain over here too. Provocation in the sectarian problem, that's happening here now.
Yet however much the Turks would like to find a way out of the conflict next door, desperate Syrians, like this mother and her 4 children, will keep trying to find their way in.
And you can watch Margaret's previous reports from Turkey and Syria on our website.